This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. From America to Australia, we've been rocked by gun violence these past few days as we head into the holidays. We see the expected and understandable outpouring of shock and grief. Today, we're looking at what it's like for young people to live with the fear of gun violence or the threat of it. Let us know if you have a child or a loved one in school, and what are you hearing from them? We would love to hear from you and your story. Give us a call, 888-720-9677. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live, or you can also email us at wherewelive@ctpublic.org. And with me today is Nelba Marquez Green, who is the mother of Anna Grace, who was killed in the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in 2012. Nelba is also a community scholar at the Yale School of Public Health and also a licensed therapist for marriage and family therapy. Thank you so much, Nelba, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So before we get into the conversation, I want to start off by asking you, how are you doing? Knowing this is a very heavy question.
Here and excited for this conversation. I do want to point out, though, that while most people introduce me as the mother of a child lost in Newtown, I also have a child who survived Newtown and was in the building. And these are often kids representative of children we ignore in our country.
And that's certainly something that we will be talking about today. And since you just mentioned it, it's an obvious question too, but why is it important to point that out? Because they're often forgotten.
I think what we saw and what we do typically, let's take after Parkland, for example, we say the kids will fix this. Look at how they're doing, right? And we expect this incredibly vulnerable population. And yes, they have great ideas, but we expect them to have the solutions to these problems that it's just really unrealistic. And I think that when we do that, when we talk about kids and continue to expose them to violence, but expect that they by themselves solve the problems, I think we're just doing them a disservice.
Well, I think something that got really heavy, throughout the last couple of years or decade maybe, is saying that our children are resilient.
Right.
So how far do we take the word resilience, and how much of it is another talking point?
So resilience happens when stress is predictable, measured, intermittent, right? Resilience does not get built when stress is prolonged, when stress is at this level of intensity. We and think about this too. Culturally, we tend to call those communities most vulnerable and we least protect resilient because we want the most effort from them back and we are not resourcing them. So yes, children are resilient, but not under this level of stress and trauma. That's not how resilience grows.
Well, and then building on what you just shared with us, here we are yet again hearing about another mass shooting at a school campus. I can't imagine what was going through your mind when you first heard what happened.
So what was going through my mind was the parents waiting to hear if their children were alive or injured or what state they were. What was going through my mind is, I wonder what kind of plan Brown will have to resource the faculty and the staff who will be asked to go back. We often don't think about the adults in the building that we ask to go back and lead a campus, a school through a trauma. We think, okay, the adults will lead the kids, and they often haven't been given resourcing either. So I think it's high time we kind of deconstruct these narratives of resilience and really start looking at what resources people, what helps people. So there's policy change we need, there are programmatic changes we need, but there's also how do we care for the millions of people in the United States impacted by gun violence right now? Well, even if we fix the problem today, we still have masses of families exposed and needing help to thrive.
When I think beyond the headlines and thinking about the people affected, it's usually more than you think, right?
Yes.
We have lists of people who are impacted, but the lists usually do not include the families, as you mentioned just now. And of course, we do have a slight focus on talking about how it impacts young people. But as you just mentioned, who's thinking about the teachers and the leaders in the building and the parents outside of the building, and how to sort of navigate this. So what has those conversations been like for you in terms of what do adults need?
So the great thing is I get to work now, or one of the great things is I get to work now at the School of Public Health, where we actually do this. We identify what the problem is. We get to evaluate what works. We get to scale programs that are working. Families, in order to thrive, families, first responders, adults in buildings, need a sense of safety and a sense of control. And if we can't provide environments that are safe, then we're going to miss the mark. And this is not just for families impacted by gun violence, just kind of a direct line like I am. This is first responders. No first responder is trained or desires to walk into a classroom and see what they saw in Sandy Hook, or to respond to a community shooting when there's a 16-year-old lying on a street corner. Our Hartford groups, Mothers United Against Violence, Hartford Communities That Care, Compass Youth Collaborative, these people who go and they meet with families impacted, yes, they do their work, but the vicarious trauma is also incredibly, incredibly heavy. So we need to do more to keep our community safe. And all of these groups that I'm mentioning and that you can research that are working in Hartford and areas beyond, they're all a part of that ecosystem. So we need to strengthen the ecosystem is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I want to also talk about what are some of the things that we can do. For example, we're talking about adults, so teachers in the classroom. I know there's a lot of call for teachers need to do more, but what exactly can they do? Because I'm surrounded by teachers of all levels, and it really just breaks my heart when I hear them say the first thing that they think about when they go into a classroom is, okay, so what can they do to blockade the classroom in case something happens? Or what do I have on my desk that can potentially act as a weapon? A stapler, for example, that could be something that you can hurl at somebody who could be impacting the classroom. So, but these are things that you should not expect teachers to think about because they're supposed to be there to teach kids.
That's exactly right. And I think it's difficult because every teacher is going to need a different thing. So there are groups like Teachers Unify, run by Abby Clements, who's a survivor of Sandy Hook, that offers teachers a place where they can get support after they've been exposed to violence. She offers resources and trainings for teachers. So there's that if you need it. Some teachers just want to be able to have the conversation. They want a different place in the building to have their classroom, right? So we can do kind of universal prescriptions, but it's also important to listen to people's individual needs because every teacher is actually going to need something different. I wish there was a magic wand I had that can be a one-size-fits-all solutions for everyone, but we can't really do activism without relationships. So the key here is to be in relationship with those teachers and listen for their needs, or those first responders, or those families.
And as you have these conversations with all of the people that you're having these conversations with, are you continuously still seeing anxiety around guns on campus? You know, how does this show up in young people?
Oh my gosh, not just young people, but colleagues. Mm-hmm. Are we safe? What do we do? Do we have the infrastructure? Do we have the same thing you said about, the teachers wondering when they enter into a classroom, what would I use to keep myself safe? There is not one person that works in a college that isn't having this conversation. My husband's a faculty at WestConn, right? I work at Yale. My son's at a local university. Mm-hmm. We think about these things every day, and we need leadership. We need direction, transparency, and clarity from our leaders to tell us what's available to us.
And are those things that you're seeing, the transparency, the discussions? Because as you mentioned, you're a community scholar at Yale. You're bridging the gap between policy, research, and the community. So how do you do that? And what does that look like?
Interestingly, just yesterday we had a staff meeting where we just made space for it. If you are afraid, if you need to talk, we are here. You have to build that container. And I'm just really fortunate to work at an institution that values conversation, and we just had that conversation yesterday, and it's an ongoing. It's also not a one and done reactive after a tragedy. We need to be having these kinds of transparent conversations all the time because they peak after a tragedy, but they're always there.
Well, and actually just following what you just mentioned, because I think there is a sort of immediate reaction from people reading the news or seeing what happened, and people, I think their instinct is they want to help survivors. They want to help the victims.
Yes.
So to help families, especially from where you're standing, what's the best way to do that?
Relationship. You need to be in relationship. A lot of people want to help me because they know my story from Sandy Hook. But I bet if you live in Connecticut within a 10-mile radius from you, if not your own family, has been impacted by gun violence, whether it's domestic violence, suicide, harm, you name it. Somebody else has been impacted by gun violence. Be in relationship with some, and it doesn't always have to be a mass shooting. I actually discourage that because we have a disproportionate amount of paid attention to mass shooting victims and not enough to people who might live in your own neighborhood. Stories they're carrying that you don't know. So you can't help anyone without being in relationship because there is no one size fits all model.
And actually, you just inspired me to ask, we're talking about relationships. We're mostly talking about community, your neighbor next to you. But you've also been very open on social media to share your story and talk to people. So for those who might consider that to be a safer space, maybe before they step out into the world with human beings, what are your thoughts of social media as a platform to be able to connect with people who might not have ever known of your story or other people's stories?
For me, it's been very, it's been a positive. It's been a net positive. I've been able to connect with people across the world, but not everyone is ready for that step, and not everyone is ready for that level of vulnerability. It is something that also might expose you to conspiracy theorists or, people with less than good intentions. So I would say to that survivor who is wondering how to start telling their story, first start from a sense of really knowing yourself and assessing what your skills and strengths might be, and also your needs, and then taking baby steps in that direction. But there's lots of groups, even in Connecticut, that support survivors. I'm thinking about New Haven. There's a plethora of bereavement care groups, and there's the city, which is doing such extraordinary things and trying to support survivors. Listening to survivor voices is going to also be essential in this process.
Well, you've been talking about other people or listening to other people, but you've been listened to too from a huge community. And before we go to break, I do want to ask, did you know you want to share your story so out in the open and being so present with Anna and keeping her alive really through your words and also keeping her in the present tense?
I am a proud graduate of Hartford Public High School, and I had this amazing high school teacher named Mr. Buckley. And one of my first thoughts after Anna died and I started writing was Mr. Buckley telling me when I was a high school student, right down the street at Hartford Public High School, that I was a writer and I should keep writing. So I just leaned into that and started telling stories because I wanted her remembered, how she lived and not just how she died. And I'm just grateful to every person that has tuned in and listened. Thank you.
Shout out to Mr. Buckley.
Yeah, shout out to Mr. Buckley, who lives in the Villages now. I love you, Mr. Buckley.
So very important to have teachers and your educators in your life who encourages that.
Right.
We're talking with Nelba Marquise Green, who is a community scholar at the Yale School of Public Health and also a licensed therapist for marriage and family therapy. You can also join the conversation. Let us know if you would like to share your story or if you have any questions for us. Give us a call, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. After a mass shooting, after the headlines, the shock, and the public outpouring of grief, survivors pick up the pieces and try to rebuild a life. The focus is on victims, but survivors can feel truly alone after the news cycle of tragedy fades. Public health experts say this is when survivors need support, and there are many ways to support them: therapy, relocation assistance, and even help learning a new trade. So what does that healing look like? With me is Renee Beavers, who's the hospital violence intervention specialist with Connecticut Children's, and she's going to help us understand how or what that healing looks like. Renee, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So you're a part of the hospital's trauma team. You meet with survivors of gun violence. Tell us about these children and youth. What does the conversation look like?
So the conversation, of course, looks different for each family. I have the experience of getting to tailor what each family needs based on what brought them into the hospital. And so a lot of the work that I do with families is introducing exactly what I do and what I bring with me into the room I am not alone. And I think really what I think about is relationships. I work with a lot of community-based organizations who also want to make sure that when this person leaves the hospital, there is a plan put in place. The number one thing I say to families is, I'm so glad that you are here. I'm so glad that you are alive, right? A lot of families sometimes that I meet with, their children don't make it. And so how do we tailor a plan for this family for when they leave the hospital that is going to address everything that's happened to them before they go?
And what does that care look like? And of course, it's different for everyone.
Yeah, every family is different. So really, what the care looks like is thinking about safety, like what brought them in, and also educating them around what they just experienced. I think we do tend to focus on the patient, but there is somebody with them in that room. There are families there that has also been traumatized by their loved one being hurt, and what can we offer the whole entire family, not just that patient. And so I think of working with the family as a whole, and even just starting very small and educating them on what they may feel days prior after it, right? So what are some trauma responses you may feel after just being a victim of gun violence, and it's different for everyone, but these are the things that you may notice as far as lack of sleep, lack of appetite, being nervous to leave an area, leave the house, and just educating families on what's next. And also understanding that a lot of families don't know what's out there as far as support. And so letting them know that, organizations like Mothers United Against Violence, organizations like Hartford Communities That Care, organizations like Compass Youth have things for families to help them through this process. So that's what I try to educate my families on, and connecting them to services before they leave the hospital. And of course, I have families who may say, no, I'm not ready for that yet. And that's okay. I give them a couple of times to turn me down. They just went through a horrible ordeal. No one's going to be open right now. But I do check-ins. And if they tell me before I leave the hospital, we're not ready yet, then that may just mean that we may have to do a home visit later. And if they say that, you know what, miss, I think I might need some help, then me going to the home with a community-based organization and doing a warm handoff, just making sure that family has services. So that's the work that I do.
Well, it sounds like a lot of the services you provide, of course, relates to medical services. You have mental health, physical health, and all of that encompassing. But it also sounds like a really large element is active listening from your part. So how do you prepare yourself to go into these spaces? While unfortunately it's familiar to you, but with every family that comes in, or every child that comes in, what do you do for yourself before you go into that?
The way that I approach each family before I go in, I just think of it as an honor. This family is very vulnerable. And if they're allowing me to go in and sit with them and talk to them and listen to them, I walk into that space feeling very honored because they're at a place where their emotions all over the place, and I have to sit with them through that and accept whatever they come at me. And that's why sometimes they're like, you know what, not right now. I'm like, okay, I'll come back. But also understanding that you can't take anything personal. This is their journey, and if they allow me to come with them on this journey, then that is what I'm willing to do. But yeah, I just think of it as an honor.
And you speak to families that also have young children. So can you give us an idea of what the age range is like? And are conversations with kids different to those with adults?
Oh, absolutely. I think my youngest child who's been a victim of gun violence has been 6. And he was just going in to the house for dinner. He was being called in for dinner, and unfortunately in the neighborhood there was gunshots, and he became a victim. Luckily he survived, but a 6-year-old and his reaction to that violence is very different from a 17-year-old, a 22-year-old. And so the conversation that we have to have and helping him understand what's happened to him is so, and his reactions are so different, and what services he receives based on a 17 or 18-year-old is very different. And I think, the trauma that children, based on their age, shows, you have to be very aware of how you, the details of what services you offer them, because you want to make sure that when that 6-year-old leaves the hospital and has to go back to school. And sometimes they have to go back to the neighborhood that they were shot in. Very rarely do we have money to relocate every single family, every victim of violence. And so now the place that they loved and enjoyed and that they played with friends with now is a trauma scene for them. And how are they going to handle going back? And how are the families going to handle? Because having a child who has significant trauma, you have to parent very different. And I think we have to think about the family as a whole and how do we prepare this family for the 6-year-old coming out of the hospital. So it is very different based on the age.
Well, and we've been talking about how the journey starts, and you're with them throughout this process, which is a lifelong healing journey, right? How do you measure success? Of course, the word success is so nebulous and intangible sometimes, but for many people, it looks different. So how would you measure that in terms of someone's healing journey?
From the hospital point of view, a very black and white success is, do they come back re-injured, right? We don't want to, I say to my teenagers, oh my goodness, I hope I never see you again. Like, please, right? But I think, we also measure success in, the changes they make, and do they accept services and make the changes they want to make in their lives. And I think that's why connecting them to services is so pivotal, because they don't know what's out there, and they may not know that there's a different way, or people out there who are interested in them, who want to see them thrive. And so introducing them to services and getting them mentors, and even little things like letting them help them get an ID. The spark they have of, oh wow, like I can go back to school and I can do these things, and there are people who are rooting for me. And I think that's why connection is so important with this work, because you want to connect in the services that love young people and want to see them thrive. So I think, my level of success is, number one, them never coming back, right? No more re-injury, but also, are they on a path to a different life? Are they willing to go back to school? Are they willing to get a trade? Are they willing to do something different than what they were?
And are these services that you provide, are they available free of cost to them? Do they go through a process?
They are available free of cost. So when we started this program, we thought about connecting the services in the community, because that's the point, right? A lot of these families don't have resources or money, especially when it comes to mental health services. And the connections that we make, before they leave, we do make sure they have some sort of health insurance. Most of our families do, which, you can get mental health services based on, what you can, like through insurance. But a lot of our services we offer are free. They're free to them. If you are a victim of violence, you get to be, get entitled to these services. And so they are free to them.
Well, before we go to break, I want to come back to Nelba for a moment here. You've been listening to this conversation. Anything that jumped out to you that you would like to respond?
I think if there are people listening who really want to get involved, one easy way is to connect with a community program that assists these families in this lifelong work of healing, and offer funding, because choice also matters to families. Agency matters to families, and the more well-resourced these community groups are, the better they can meet the needs of that family. Sometimes it's therapy. Sometimes it might be money to join a baseball team or go bowling, have joy. And we need to make sure with all of these budget cuts that these local CBOs doing the work on the ground are funded. Everything Renee said resonates.
Well, we'll have both of these organizations available on our webpage for you all to check out, sctpublic.org/where we live. Thank you to Renee Beavers for joining us today. And also Nelba, we've been talking about support systems that victims of gun violence need in order to heal and thrive. Thank you, Renee, for being with us today.
Oh, thank you.
And also Nelba, appreciate your time as well.
Thank you.
You can also join the conversation, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. There have been 75 shootings at U.S. colleges and universities this year, up from 36 in 2021. That's according to The Trace, a nonprofit organization. Gen Z is growing up with these statistics and the mental health stressors that come from a culture of gun violence. It starts with lockdown drills in elementary school. We'll hear from an advocacy group on what it's like for young people and what they're doing to create change. In the studio with me today is Stacey Mayer, who's the Director of Advocacy, Policy, and Outreach at CT Against Gun Violence. Thank you so much for being with us, Stacey.
Thanks so much for having me.
And also with us is Melina Paris, who's a student at Hopkins School in New Haven and also president of the CT Against Gun Violence Youth Council. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start by reading out loud a testimony that you testified in favor of a bill this past session. Every day when I walk into school, a fear lingers in the back of my mind. Every time I hear someone I don't recognize or I see someone I don't recognize in the building, I feel a pang of anxiety. Every morning before stepping out of my parents' car, I say I love you because what if that's the last time I ever get to say it? This fear exists because school shootings continue to happen. So can you tell me more about your anxiety and if more people in your generation are feeling the same way?
Yeah, definitely. I have generalized anxiety to begin with. So when I am at school, we actually recently implemented these key cards. And while they don't outright tell us why we have them, we can piece it together. And it's terrifying to think that we need them to get into buildings and that we're not safe at school. And it's a constant fear in the back of my minds and all my friends' minds.
So it sounds like the key card was created for safety, but you perhaps don't feel that way just because of the context behind it.
Yeah, definitely. I don't feel safe. I'm scared every time when I don't, like I said in that testimony, when I don't recognize someone on campus, as we have a pretty small school, and I have all these thoughts when I see someone, and when I hear that bell for a school shoot or for a drill, I have that fear that it could be the real time, this one.
Well, and it's not every day that a high school student feels the need to go and make a testimony in front of a bunch of adults making policy at the state level, right? And you testified in favor of a bill to make lockdown drills trauma-informed. So can you give me an idea of what made you want to do that and why is it important to have this conversation?
Yeah, we're not asking to get rid of drills because we know that this is a reality, but we think that it's important for lawmakers to take into account that people are coming into school already traumatized from other events in their life, and it really creates a fear that's disproportionate to the risk. Like less than 1% of deaths by firearms are from school shootings, and so it's terrifying students when they don't need to be.
And do you feel like you're being listened to?
No. It feels good to be on here today, and I feel like I'm being listened to today, but I don't feel like action is happening on a higher level.
Mm. Well, and Stacey, with what you just heard, how confident are you that the legislation will pass?
Well, we're very hopeful, and we are confident that this session will be able to push this bill through. Last session, so 2025, the bill was voted out of the Education Committee with unanimous support. It passed out of the House with strong bipartisan support as well. The last day of the session, we learned that Senate Republicans were not going to support the bill. We weren't given any policy reasons as to why, but I do know that this remains a priority, and we will be advocating and pushing for it to move through again this session when it starts in February.
Well, what was going through your mind when we just heard from Melanie and her sharing the story?
I think it's heartbreaking. I mean, Melanie is so articulate and composed and poised, but the fears and anxiety that she's talking about, those are practically universal fears now of any student in America. And I think that's why this bill is so important. It should not be controversial. All the bill is doing is taking best practices and in terms of these drills and putting them into practice in the state of Connecticut. Because right now, there's really no cohesive approach to these drills. They're required, but school districts can sort of do as they wish. And so this bill will require districts to make those drills trauma-informed, which means giving notice to families, giving notice to students so that when they do hear that bell, they'll know, okay, we've been told this is a drill. I can not be as worried. So that fear and that anxiety that Malini's talking about will be reduced. It's taking into account that outside trauma so we don't re-traumatize students. It's making sure that there's age-appropriate education and discussion about the drills in advance so that students feel better going into them. You know, as we've been discussing, these drills are important. We do want our children to be prepared to know what to do in an emergency, but we need to make sure we're not crossing that line where we're causing more psychological harm.
Well, and Malini, I wanted to follow up on what you were sharing earlier, and as Stacy just shared too. You know, this is a reality. This is something that we must do in order to provide safety. But when we were talking with Nelba earlier, we've discussed about the word resilience being used for young people. You know, going through all of this and being able to survive, but maybe not thrive. What are your thoughts when you see or hear people, you know, basically describe, well, young people are very resilient. You know, you'll make it through.
I am very strong. My friends are very strong, but we shouldn't have to go through this. This isn't a normal part of growing up. Like, it shouldn't be. It is our reality, but it's not comforting, and it's really disappointing and disheartening.
Well, and as both of you have shared, recognizing that drills are important and they do help, I do want to share a quick anecdote that one of the survivors told the New Hampshire Attorney General, Peter Neronha, and he disclosed the story in the news media that one of the young victims told him that it's because of the school drills, that the gun drills, and that he knew what to do at that moment at Brown University. So how does that make you feel when you hear that?
I think sort of mixed emotions. On the one hand, it is, again, just devastating that these drills, the skills that they're taught do come into play in just with a heartbreaking frequency. And also it does remind us that it's important to have students be prepared. But I think that's what's important about this legislation is that it's really trying to toe that line and prioritize both the physical safety of our students and also their psychological and emotional well-being. And so, you know, I'm happy to hear that student felt prepared in the moment. But, you know, again, you know, I'm a mom. I have 3 kids. And so this is something that, as a parent, we all think about daily when we send our kids off to school.
Yeah, I would say that I can remember every single room, where to go in every single room of my elementary school during a lockdown drill. And I think it's important when I was in that grade, in that school, to know what I was doing, but that fear didn't end when that bell went off. Like, it's with me today. It's with me every single day since then.
Well, and I want to talk more about both of your work with gun violence mitigation, but I'm curious to hear, you know, when you're going through these drills, after the drills, you're seeing these headlines, you're having this conversation, what do you do to take care of yourself?
I don't know what to do. The fear doesn't go away, so I don't know how to handle it.
And Stacy, you know, with that in mind, you know, what can we do as society, as human beings, to help young people?
I think a lot of the things that Nelba spoke about during her segment, creating relationships, listening to people, listening to what their needs are, and let them tell us how we can support them. So for students, it might be, you know, a better trauma-informed drill, or it might be giving them a creative outlet to write about their feelings, or maybe it's just being involved in a sport after school, or whatever it is to make sure that we're reducing anxiety, taking care of ourselves. And I do think maybe I'll go out on a limb and say that having Malini participate in our youth council will give her a feeling of maybe a little bit more empowerment and an opportunity to have her voice heard. You know, hearing her testify live and in person at the Education Committee hearing last year was a really, really moving moment. She was joined by other students from across the state who felt just as strongly about this bill. And so the Youth Council does give students an opportunity to feel heard and feel seen. And it's a student-led organization, so the kids really can sort of, you know, pick the activities and the projects that they want to work on that will make them feel good.
Well, and Malini, I wanted to mention too, in reflection with what you shared with us so far, is I always have mixed feelings when I see young people like yourself doing testimony because it's so powerful. I cannot imagine myself doing that. When I was that age, I was sort of fangirling over whatever I was fangirling over. And that's why it reminds me of the word resilience. It's really unfair to ask you to carry that burden. But as Stacey was just sharing, I wonder if that empowerment is helpful for you as perhaps part of how you take care of yourselves that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, it definitely is. I had texted Stacey after I heard about the Brown shooting and about how I felt so helpless, and that's how I got involved in this work in the first place. But having a place where I can channel that helplessness and actually do something about it is really helpful. And I think being up there and testifying was a moment that felt like I'm doing the work and I'm doing what I can, and my peers on the council are all helping and we're working together. And we had one of our bills that we testified for passed last year, and that was a moment of like our work there are successful outcomes here, and I hope that we can get another one this session.
Did you ever think you were going to get involved with an organization like this, or to do this work at this level?
Definitely not. I am sad that I'm here. As excited as I was when Stacey texted me, I don't want to be here at the same time. I wish I didn't have to be, but I do, and that's the reality. So I'm going to do with that what I can.
And Stacey, what is it like to work with students on the council?
It's really very inspiring. As you said, when I was a teenager, I don't know that I would have had sort of the inspiration to do the work that they're doing. And so it's also very motivating for myself and my colleagues at Connecticut Against Gun Violence. It's sad that this is the state of our country. But to know that there are kids who are so engaged and invested and want to make a difference, it sort of, powers along our work as well.
And are you hopeful with the movement? There's a lot of movement, I think, that happens behind the scenes that we perhaps don't hear about, but there is movement that's making things happen.
Yes, absolutely. As Malini referenced, we did successfully pass legislation last session, which was the Firearm Industry Responsibility Act, which is holding gun manufacturers responsible when they don't exert reasonable controls over weapons. And also what we're seeing is collective work in this ecosystem that is really making a difference in gun death rates, especially in Connecticut. We know that it's a complex issue. It takes legislation, but it also takes the work from groups on the ground that we've heard a lot about this last hour, Hartford Communities That Care, Compass Collaborative, Mothers United Against Violence, who are working to interrupt violence on the streets in communities across the state, which is where it starts. And so we are seeing some success in that. And we also know that it comes from funding support. Funding these groups, and this is across the country, not just in Connecticut, but we're seeing when we all work together to support these groups and pass strong gun laws. I mean, there's a reason that Connecticut's gun death rate is among the lowest in the country, and it's because we have among the strongest gun laws in the country. But borders are porous, and we want to do what we can to protect us here in Connecticut. But we need to have an eye to the rest of the country as well. But we did see in the last few years under the Biden administration, with the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, all of the implementation of all of those things really did help bring down gun death rates. And so we need to continue that work.
And last question for you, Malini, is as we look into the future, is this work that you will continue going into college? Do you have plans to go to college?
Yes, I do. I'm applying right now. It's a bit of a stressful time, but I definitely want to pursue this work when I'm in college.
And is that something that you're looking forward to? If that's a
yes
phrase
and
that I can add, yeah.
There's mixed feelings, but I am committed to reducing gun violence around the country, and I'm working with organizations nationwide now as well, and so I'm excited to continue that.
Well, we want to just thank both of you for being on the show today and having this very important conversation. Thank you, Renee, and thank you, Malini, and thank you to Stacey.
Thanks so much.
I'm Catherine Shen. Today's show is produced by Sujata Srinivasan, who's our senior health reporter. Our technical producer is Dylan Reyes. Download Where We Live anytime on your favorite podcast app. And thank you all so much for listening.
Little voices calling, little voices laughing, little voices singing, all those precious little voices, brightening our day, stealing our hearts, shaping our lives. In the blink of an eye, they're gone. Now there's just silence, where those little voices used to be. Now it's up to you. It's up to me. Will you make the choice to be a voice? Will you walk humbly, show mercy, and love your neighbor? Will you love your neighbor? Not fear the neighbor who looks different than you, or hurt the neighbor who thinks differently than you do. But will you love your neighbor? Will you love yourself? Will you teach a child today? Will you be your brother's keeper? Will you make someone smile? Will you do all you can to love, to forgive, to include, to help, so that the millions of little voices who are still here to brighten our days, steal our hearts, and shape our lives can grow tall and strong and learn from us how to forgive and love, learn from us how to help and to include, and eventually, one day, become the big, confident voices that will change our world and make it better